The Nobleman and Gentleman's Catch Club, still going strong today, was founded in London in the 18th century, early in the reign of King George III. When George III came to the throne in 1760, Britain had once again a native-born monarch. Both George I and George II had been born in Germany. It was a good time for loyal, solvent citizens. Culloden and the collapse of the Jacobite threat were 15 years in the past. The previous year, 1759, had seen a series of worldwide victories over the French, which ensured the spread of empire and the flourishing of trade. Much of the profit returned to London. Now, well-to-do Georgians, particularly in London, were ready to take pleasure in things, in their houses, their families, their children, their possessions, and increasingly in music. Royalty had given a lead. This is George III's father and his aunts playing music together on lute, keyboard and cello against a background of the Dutch house in Kew Gardens, which was a favourite summer resort for the royal family. George III had married in the year after his coronation, after a thorough review of all eligible German Protestant princesses. Charlotte Sophia of Mecklenburg-Strelitz would make an excellent wife and queen, and when she needed a music master, understandably, she chose a German. Johann Christian Bach, known now as the English Bach, was the youngest son of Johann Sebastian. He had first come to London to work in the opera house, but he soon discovered a more profitable outlet for his music in the form of concerts. His partner in the new venture was another visitor from Germany. Carl Friedrich Abel was a virtuoso on the viola da gamba, the ancestor of the cello, and he too was employed by Queen Charlotte. The Bach-Abel concerts began here in Soho Square in 1762, then moved to Hanover Square, establishing themselves as a fashionable fixture in the London season, catering for a new and increasingly sophisticated audience. It was at these concerts that Londoners first heard a Haydn symphony, though J.C. Bach also had plenty of his own on offer as well, such as this one, which he had written first as an overture to an opera. During the 18th century, the Thames west of London became increasingly the fashionable place for country villas. Just up the river from the royal residence at Kew was Twickenham, where Horace Walpole was engaging in a somewhat eccentric architectural scheme. I am going to build a little Gothic castle at Strawberry Hill. With those words written in 1750, Horace Walpole announced the beginning of a delightful architectural fancy which survives unspoilt today, and which suggests perfectly a mood of enjoyable frivolity, shared by the leisured classes in the second half of the 18th century. If Strawberry Hill was conceived as a mock castle, it developed rather more into a make-believe abbey, with Horace Walpole often signing his letters, the Abbot of Strawberry. Either way, it provided just the light-hearted medieval setting which he required for his own performance, as a leader of the new cult for anything romantically old world or Gothic. This was a period when ladies and gentlemen were beginning to collect prints of buildings of the Middle Ages, a style which in recent years had been totally unfashionable, and were sticking them into their history books as extra illustrations. But Walpole went one better. He recreated them in 3 dimensions. The decoration of this staircase, as his servants would explain to the stream of visitors who came to see it, is based on the tomb of the brother of Henry VIII in Worcester Cathedral. Walpole had it copied from a print. In his day, there were all sorts of trophies in these niches: longbows, broadswords, coats of mail, which had supposedly been brought back from the Crusades by an entirely fictitious ancestor. It was all a delightful charade, of which Walpole himself was the ever-willing central character. Important visitors were always taken to see his private printing press, where a poem relating to their visit would be printed while they watched, to the accompaniment on at least one occasion of hidden French horns and clarinets. French horns and clarinets also sometimes played in the cloisters down there. The arches were open in those days, while Walpole and his guests dined in the long gallery above. Walpole himself admitted to having no great interest in music, and his repeated use of French horns and clarinets suggests that he valued it chiefly as a lightweight accompaniment to his own theatrical effects. But he does make a comment in one of his letters which is more characteristic of the time. If he had children, he says, he would encourage in them an interest in music. And his reasons? First, music always amuses and soothes, if not consoles. Second, of all the fashionable pleasures, it is the cheapest. And third, unlike other mortal passions, it is sure of being gratified in heaven. Well, that last observation is essentially tongue-in-cheek Walpole himself. But seeing music mainly as a fashionable source of amusement and delight, rather than anything more weighty, was an attitude shared by many music lovers in the London of the time. Often they would set out to find such music at a pleasure garden. The principal ones, Vauxhall and Ranelagh, could both be reached by river. Indeed, the Thames was still London's main thoroughfare. Work on the first Westminster Bridge, soon to be immortalised by Wordsworth, had been going on since 1738. But even after it was finished, a boat trip remained the most glamorous way of setting off for an evening's entertainment. The bridge was opened in 1750. The present-day one is, in fact, a 19th century replacement. And it immediately provided a totally new musical experience for those enjoying themselves on the river. The only other bridge at that time was Old London Bridge, which had narrow arches with water rushing between them. So it was under Westminster Bridge that Londoners first discovered the pleasure of an echo made by a large span. It became the fashionable thing to hire horn players. They could later also serenade you as you strolled round Vauxhall Garden, and to get them to give a performance under the arches. A side wall, where you paid a shilling. But once inside, physical and musical appetites were well catered for. Around the gardens there were supper boxes in which to listen to the music. Here you could dine from the food on sale in the gardens. The ham was sliced so thin it was said you could read a newspaper through it. Or you could play at being gypsies, making your own picnic. When a fancy dress event is held at Osterley Park in 18th century costume, there is a surface similarity with an evening at Vauxhall. But this is a special occasion, whereas Vauxhall was quite simply the best available place for a good night out on any summer's evening.
She was